morning, everyone. I'm Dave Montour. I'm the past chair of the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce, and I'm still very active with your Chamber of Commerce as a director. There's one other person in the room I wanted to acknowledge. Patty Mullen, could you stand up? Many of you will remember Patty. She worked tirelessly for many years as the CEO of our West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. And we just really love having her in the room and thank her for all her hard work in the years past. It's my honor today to introduce our keynote speaker. I first met then candidate Murray when he came to West Seattle. He wanted a view of the neighborhood business district, the West Seattle Junction. And I took him on a walking tour. It was a very nice sort of intimate event. It was just me and him one-on-one. I would send him into a shop. He got to meet the local shop owner. He went to Husky Deli. He had an ice cream cone. Went up to Easy Street Records, and he got an Easy Street Records sticker in exchange for a Murray for Mayor sticker. And it was a nice event, and I remember that. And then the next time I met him was after the election in November at an Office of Economic Development function, a business casual. He came to that event. He wasn't on the program or anything like that. He wasn't a speaker, but he knew he was coming into a very unique job, and he was there to make connections, to build relationships, to rekindle old relationships that he might have had with the city. And I just thought that spoke very highly of the mayor-elect at that time, that he was there to make connections, and he really understands the business community and really wants to be there for our business community. So of course, after the speaker spoke, I saw the then mayor-elect standing by himself, so I took the opportunity to run up and say, "Hey Mayor, you remember me? I'd like to be our keynote speaker for our annual awards breakfast." Without hesitation, he didn't say, "I got to check my calendar, check with my staff." He simply said, "I'd be honored." Today, it's my honor to introduce Mayor Ed Murray.
Thank you for that very nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me here this morning. As many of you know, I spent my childhood in West Seattle, first in Fauntleroy and then in Alki. I actually used to play in what is now the Log Cabin Museum. Our friends across the street then owned that house. So the fact that I played in a place that is now a museum may either say something about West Seattle or about my So it's especially moving, actually, to stand here back in West Seattle as your mayor. There's another reason I'm really happy to be in West Seattle, and that's because West Seattle gave me a larger vote margin than my own legislative district. So thank you, Joe McDermott. So I was going to say thank you, Joe McDermott, for endorsing me. You're lucky to have Joe. Joe and I served in the House and the Senate together, and it's great to serve in local government with Joe. So I want to touch on a few issues, and then I'd really like to hear from you all, your questions or comments or criticisms. Let me begin with a discussion around the neighborhood summit that we're going to do on Saturday. The role of neighborhoods in our city has changed and evolved over time. Sometimes there's been more involvement and more say on the part of neighborhoods. At other times, there's been less. I think this is an opportunity for folks to come together who live in Seattle, who have businesses in Seattle, to decide how we want to reinvent the city's relationship with our neighbors, with our neighborhoods, how we want to participate in deciding what the future character of our neighborhoods should look like, including our neighborhood business districts. So far, 500 people have RSVP'd, and because this is the Northwest and everyone RSVP'd in the last 12 hours, we expect that number to grow. But I would encourage you all to come, and an aspect of this summit is around neighborhood business districts. Neighborhood business districts are vital to the character of the city. They give our neighborhoods the feel and the reason that people like to walk around our neighborhoods, move to a city where you can shop, you have stores, where you don't just see chain stores, but you see small independent operators. It's that diversity we want to learn how to preserve and help, and that'll be another aspect of it. I was just going to mention, when I think of neighborhood business districts, I can't help but think in the 60s when I lived in Alki, and there was Triggs Groceries. Does anyone remember Triggs? Okay, someone shook their hand. And the drugstore across the street, I can't remember the name of it anymore. Or when I would take the bus to Holy Rosary Elementary School and the wonderful stores at the market, at the junction. I can still remember most of them. One was a bank then, it's still a bank. I know it's changed names several times, but but the character of both those neighborhoods can be replicated throughout Seattle, each unique, but each very, very important to the future of our city. So I would encourage all of you to come. During the campaign, one of the things I realized when people talked about the issue of growth and how we're going to grow as a city, when they talked about the issue of density, they were also at the same time talking about the issue of transportation and how we are going to move through the city that we live in and move in and out of the city, and how we are going to deal with growth if we don't have the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure to handle growth. So I want to give you a few thoughts. First of all, we have to preserve the current transit we have. And that is why Proposition 1 that's on the ballot on April 22nd is so incredibly important. If we fail at the ballot, we will lose 17% of our capacity. That will affect West Seattle. It will affect the ability of people to get to work on the east side. It will affect our ability to move through this city. It isn't the choice it wouldn't be the revenue source that Councilmember McDermott or I would choose, but it's the only option we have. We know moving forward that we have an issue that we've had even before the Great Recession. How do we stabilize funding for Metro Transit? It is an unanswered question. But before we can explore that issue, we have to stabilize and maintain what we have. So I would encourage you to please remember to vote on April 22nd. I know you will. But please vote for Proposition 1. Because without it, not only will people suffer in this city, people will suffer throughout this county. We're in the process of hiring a new director of the Department of Transportation. Currently, there's a community committee I put together of about 30 people. We have a website. We're going to go around the city and ask you what you're looking for in a director, but also what you're looking for from the Department of Transportation. How do we take transportation to the next level? So I would encourage all of you to take a look at that website, send us your thoughts. There will be some opportunities, some community meetings, perhaps participate in those. Because as we look about how we're going to work transportation going forward, we're going to have to make some we're going to have to make some choices. We're going to have to prioritize. Something Seattle doesn't like to do very much. We like to be for everything, but we don't necessarily like to make a choice about what we're going to pay for first. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions going forward. In my mind, one of the decisions we need to make is how are we going to fund a rapid transit system through West Seattle into the center of the city. And while Sound Transit does have plans, those plans are probably decades away. And I don't believe that we can wait decades to identify some form of rapid transit for West Seattle. It might be grade separated bus system that runs through the city on a route that would eventually be a light rail route. Something that could move people more quickly through the West Seattle, across the West Seattle Freeway. We need to look at how we manage the West Seattle Freeway so that we can move people through that corridor to work and to their homes. I think that the challenges you face moving out of West Seattle into other parts of the city is the biggest transportation challenge that we face as a city. It's not the 520 bridge, it's here in West Seattle. So I pledge to you, once we have a new director in place, we will be meeting with all of you and with our counterparts at the federal and state and county level to decide what we do between now and the time that light rail finally comes to West Seattle to deal with the issue of transit in West Seattle. Along those lines, I've been asked to talk about Bertha, so I will. Luckily, it's not April Fool's Day. I'm gonna say something. I want to be clear about something. So, Bertha is a state project, and it's not directly under the responsibility of the city. Now, having said that, that sounds like a politician sort of pointing fingers. It's a difference. It's a distinction without a difference. It's up to all of us whether we're at the city level or the state level or the contractors at the county level, to figure out how to get Bertha fixed, to figure out how we are going to get that corridor open. Otherwise, this city will suffer. So we developed, we began Office of the Central Waterfront. We've taken all aspects within the city related to the Central Waterfront, and we've centralized that in one office. Because I inherited a situation where there were huge tensions between the state, the county, and the city over how to move forward on the tunnel, a bit of a controversial issue. So we have now developed a central place that for people to come for information and for the folks in that office to work with the state and to work with the county so that we can move this project forward. So Bertha is broken, and we aren't going to know how broken Bertha is until they're building a shaft so they can actually get down and see what's going on. We know seals are damaged. The bearing may be damaged, and while publicly people are saying months, it's my, I'm not an expert, but having talked to the experts, I believe that Bertha will take many months, maybe 9 months, beyond the current stoppage before it is fixed. I think we in government need to be straight with all of you. Perhaps we can beat that deadline. Perhaps we can get this back on track. We're having a series of meetings with the governor and the county executive on how to do this. But there's no way to avoid the fact that this is a complex challenge. Having said that, mega projects always have complex challenges. Tunnels always have complex challenges. At some point in this project, there was going to be a challenge. And quite honestly, while I wish this hadn't happened, I'm glad it happened earlier on, where we can actually get at Bertha, than later on when it's deeper underground. But you have my pledge that this city will do everything to cooperate with the contractors, with the state, and with the county to get this project underway. Let me say a word about public safety, and then I'll stop so we can get questions and hear from all of you. We're in the process of hiring a new chief of police. The applications close tomorrow. The interviewing begins next week, and I should be able to send a name to the council in early to mid-May. This is a key component of the police reform that's been mandated by the federal courts. As you know, the courts found us not in compliance with the law, our police force, and we are working under a consent decree. When I became mayor, I said that public safety would be my #1 priority, and we've made significant changes to the police force. We've made significant changes to the command staff. We've created a Bureau of Accountability so that all the issues related to reform, the issues of use of force, the issue of bias policing, the issues of training and compliance are all found in a single bureau. We now have the most diverse police command staff in the history of the city. That means there's more than one person of color on it and more than one woman. We have the most diverse precinct command staff that we've had in the city's history. And that means there's more than one person of color who's on our precinct level leadership. We did something in the last few weeks. For the first time, the Seattle Police Force hired an East African. That's actually kind of embarrassing to tell you. The East African community is the largest immigrant community in Seattle. They've been in this city for well over a generation, but we've hired our first East African member of our police force. The U.S. Attorney General, Eric Holder, invited me back to the Justice Department, and we met, and he invited me because he now views Seattle as having made progress. I know that you didn't hear about that because for the news media it was a tree falling in the woods. But it actually happened. And the Department of Justice has sent the city a letter actually commending us for moving forward with police reform. That was actually in yesterday's Seattle Times, but it was hard to tell from the headline, which actually said we weren't moving forward, although the letter actually said that the city is moving forward. As I said, so anyway, and maybe I'll end on this note. Nancy, your chair had asked me when we were eating breakfast, what was the best thing about the job 90 days into it. And I had to think for a moment, but actually it involved a tragedy. The day that the helicopter crashed off of Como TV, and I went down to the site, it was incredible what happened. It was a terrible tragedy, but the security guards helped get the gentleman out of his car and roll him on the grass so that his burns were only 20%. I shouldn't say only 20%, but not the 50% they had anticipated. The police and fire were there within minutes, and that made a situation that could have been far more tragic, less tragic. The construction crew across the street took 10 tons of sand and poured it on the fuel before it could run into the drainage system. And it turned out, I didn't know this till that night, it turned out that the person who actually was sent to Harborview with the burns, he and his family are good friends of ours, so we've had a chance to be up in Harborview. And what they tell us is the outpouring of support, the thousands of cards and letters and help and food that have come forward have just left them incredibly moved. But that says something about Seattle. There was a tragedy and we all came together. And we reached out and continue to reach out to each other. And I mentioned a joke about the press, but sometimes when you read the press, you think this is not a great place to live. And that incident showed me just what an incredible city this is, what an incredibly positive place this is, and how people care for each other. And so thank you for that. And it's just an honor to be mayor of a city that reacts to a tragedy like that. So with that, I'd love to open to questions. Thank you.
Rob Shirens with IT headquarters. I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that all these big buildings that are going up in West Seattle have one parking spot for every 2 apartments, and those have to be vacated during business hours. How does that encourage people to take the bus?
Well, it is a policy that the council and my predecessor put in place. It's an issue because while we want people to take transit, and we want people to use fewer cars for a lot of reasons, including the issue of climate change. You can't do it by punishing people. You can only do it when the option of transit exists, when the alternative exists. And I live in one of the few neighborhoods in the city where you can actually take transit every 10 or 15 minutes. I live in North Capitol Hill. That's not true of the rest of the city. So I am concerned, and we are looking at these policies about, yes, we want to reduce the number of cars that people drive, but we can't do that until we also raise the level of transit. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have problems with cars in our streets, and we're going to have a problem with people who don't want to live in this city. So we haven't found that balance. And I'm more concerned about buildings that are now permitted without any parking. So again, I'm a huge transit advocate, but I don't think it has to be an either-or situation, and I don't believe currently we have found that balance. We're going to have an opportunity over the next several years to look at our comprehensive plan, to look at our urban village concept, to look at issues like parking, and this is one we need to look at. I absolutely believe that we should have fewer parking spaces, but I think, again, that has to come connected to the level of transit service that currently does not exist. Yes?
Chris Porter. West Seattle. Then Governor Gregoire and then Governor McGinn had a dispute about overages for this first project. At the time it was theoretical and now it's real. Where does the city stand in terms of how that cost overage, real cost overage, gets managed?
So the Attorney General, both. Sure. The question was, what about the cost overage and disagreement between Governor Gregoire and my predecessor on the viaduct, on the tunnel? We have 2 Attorney Generals now, two opinions, one from Rob McKenna and one from Attorney General Ferguson, that say that the city cannot be liable for cost overruns on the state project. As I mentioned earlier, the state is not responsible for the current construction of the viaduct. I think if they actually gave me the construction, I'd be happy to manage the project, and then maybe they could talk about cost overruns. So we have 2 legal opinions that says the city is not on the hook. Well, we have something else that happened this year in the legislature. The Senate Republicans amended the transportation bill to say that Seattle would be responsible for the viaduct. And my successor, Senator Peterson, added an amendment which passed that said that Medina would be responsible for overruns for 520. Guess what happened? Both amendments were withdrawn. So I think that what we're dealing with here is there isn't a city in this state that wants this city to be stuck with cost overruns on a state project. Because if it were to happen to Seattle, it would happen to Medina and every other city. So I feel fairly confident both by the legal opinions and by the reality of the politics on the ground, as an example, as Jamie showed us, Jamie Peterson, that we will not be stuck with cost overruns. It's still not clear what the level of cost overruns will be as far as the delay. And I should also remind folks that this is what's called a design-build contract. This is something particularly the business community worked the legislature to do to reform our transportation system. So design-build means that there's a level of liability on the contractor's part that the public does not assume because we are not building the project and we are not designing the project. It's a wholly owned private company, several private companies. So that also deals with some of the issues of cost overruns. One more?
Maybe one more question?
Okay, way back here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Terry Spires. Over the last 9 months or so, I've visited several of our city's iconic spots, the Space Needle, the stadium, the waterfront, and every time I've gone there, there's been open pot smoking happening there in the place. The police seem to tolerate it, and it's gotten to the point, you just don't go to Pioneer Square anymore. So I've stopped taking my family to these places because it just seems like everywhere you go, there's somebody who's, rolling a joint and smoking it, and the police seem to tolerate that. I was wondering if you could maybe comment on that, or maybe give us some direction about what the future's going to hold in respect to this topic.
Yes. So for those of you who may not have heard the question, the gentleman mentioned the issue of going to the Seattle Center, going to Pioneer Square, and people are smoking pot openly, and the kind of environment that creates. And you're right, it's going on. There are several issues when we deal with some of our neighborhoods in the center of the city. We have issues of people who are in desperate need because they're mentally ill or they're homeless or there's some sort of crisis. We have an issue of people who are breaking the law. We are working, and the county and I are beginning discussions around how we look at human services as a regional issue and not just a Seattle issue, and not a downtown Seattle issue. There are services for the homeless or people who are addicted, have addiction issues that can only be found in the core of the city of Seattle. They may live on the east side of the county, but they can only get treatment in downtown Seattle. Everyone who leaves Harborview and leaves a jail did not originate in the center of this city. So we're looking at how do we rapidly return those folks to their communities and stabilize them in their communities. So that's one of the issues that we need to deal with. The other one is people are breaking the law. And yes, I've inherited a police force that is not enforcing some laws. So we're giving a clear message. Drinking in public is illegal. Smoking pot in public is illegal. And those folks should be arrested. And we're working with our police force to get them to a place where they're going to start arresting those folks. It'll be a little easier once the legalization of marijuana is in place, because then there are other places that people can use it. It'll be a clearer playing field as far as if you're smoking marijuana and you're outside, you're going to get arrested. And I think we're going to be in a little tough transition point. But I want to assure you, if people are breaking the law, they need to be arrested. People who need help, we need to get them the help they need. But people who are doing what you said, it needs to stop. It's created a problem for our tourism industry. It's created a problem for our restaurants. It's created a problem for people who live downtown. So that's what we're going to do going forward. Thank you all.
So again, we wanted to thank Mayor Murray for coming out today and providing us with these comments. We also wanted to present him with a nice little commemorative plaque for West Seattle. Right here.